we go. Absolute value equations. Tell me this. What's an absolute value? A number with 2 lines on it. Okay, guys.
It's the distance from 0.
Distance from 0, that's an excellent textbook definition. Tell me what it does.
It gives you that absolute value.
Okay, but what is absolute value? Besides distance from a number, what's the easiest? If you were talking to somebody who had never, ever seen absolute value before, and they said, I don't even understand what that means. You tell me distance from 0, but what does that mean?
So you say you got the box, put the number aside, that's how much that number is.
All right, so I put a 5 inside.
It's a 5. It's a 5.
It's 5.
But if you put a negative sign in there, it's still 5.
Oh. So you're saying that the absolute value does what?
Makes it positive.
Makes it positive. You're exactly right. And the reason is, if we're talking about distance from 0 and we're on a number line, if this is 0 and this is -5, the distance from 0 is 5. You can't have a negative distance, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. So it makes the number positive. So if absolute value makes it positive, right? I want you to do something for me. I want you to think about this equation I'm going to give you. Notice what's in the absolute value. Okay? That's the x plus 6. So what if I said, what does this equal if x is 4? Evaluate, we'll use a good math term. Evaluate when x equals 4. And there's your expression. What does that mean? What do I do? You plug it in. All right, we're going to plug in. Now, here's what you got to remember, because we have stressed order of operations. What's the very first step in order of operations? Parentheses. But I told you before, parentheses can kind of mean a lot of different things. If we're in a fraction, it can mean the whole top of the fraction, the bottom of a fraction. It's really things that group stuff together is what the parentheses is. Absolute values are grouping symbols. They group things together, okay? So you treat them just like parentheses. You'll do those first. I'm spitting everywhere. Okay, so plug it in and tell me what happens.
It'll be 10 minus 14.
4, let's just plug it in. All right, so you're right. I've got the absolute value of 10 minus 14, right? Does that confuse anybody? I've just plugged in. That's all I did. Yeah. Huh? It confused you. Which part confused you? All right, so this told me that x equals 4. So I put the 4 in place of the x. And then just like if this was parentheses, I did the same thing. I just combined them inside parentheses first. So, but you got to remember that if it's negative, we're going to have to flip it over to positive. Yes, CJ.
In the book, you still have to look at the board. I know what I'm doing. I have a question.
All right, look. Yeah.
In the book, does it have like the lines instead of the parentheses?
Yes. Okay. Parentheses wouldn't force positive. Only absolute value forces positive. All right, so what is the absolute value of 10? -10. And then 10 minus 14, you're right, Ariana, is -4. Okay? It doesn't make my whole, and everybody listen carefully, it doesn't make my whole answer positive. It makes only what was in the absolute values positive. Okay? So let's take this same expression and let's change it up a little bit. What if I had this same absolute value of x plus 6 minus 14, and I said this time evaluate when x equals -8. So does that mean I put positive 8 in there? No. What does that mean? I put the negative in there exactly the way it tells me to. What is, yeah? Well, but then you're gonna do, you're right, inside the absolute value, I have -2. But because those lines are there that says, oh, wait, whatever it is, make sure it's positive before you go any further. So I step down and I go, oh, well, wait, because I was negative, so I'm going to make that positive and then subtract 14. What is 2 minus 14? It's okay that I get a negative number because it's only that part that is. All right, now we get to the solving part, and this is the part that's a little bit harder. Okay, and you really have to think about it. Shh, guys. Solving absolute value. That was simplifying, now we're actually going to solve. So let's say I had something like x plus 2 equals 5. And I said solve for x. What am I going to do about, okay, so you say -2, which would give me 5 minus 2, which is 3. So if you plug in 3 in that equation, does it work? Okay. But what's special about absolute values? Tell me this. What could I plug in this part to make this true? I'm talking about whole thing. The absolute value of 5 equals 5, but what else? The absolute value of what else equals 5? -5, right? It could be so I get 2 answers for these. Watch what happens. I take what's in parentheses in the absolute values, and I just set it equal here. Okay? But I have to do a second equation because I have to think not only is the absolute value of positive 5, 5, but the absolute value of -5 is 5. So I also have to think, well, what if it's negative? Then it would also work. Okay, does that make sense? So we need 2 equations. For the first equation, we simply drop the absolute values, right? That's my first equation here. For the second equation, we need to drop the absolute values and set it equal to the negative of whatever was there. Because that's the definition of absolute value. It's going to make it positive. So I need to set it equal to the positive, and then I need to set it equal to the negative. Does that make sense? So now I should get 2 answers. So you were right to subtract 2, and one of my answers would be 3. But now if I go the other way and I have to take into account the negative portion, what would my other answer be? -7. So my question is, if you plug those back in, will that work? Will both of those work? If you plug in 3, you get the absolute value of 5. Is that 5? If you plug in -7, that's the one that doesn't look like it'll work, right? You look at it and go, that can't be right. But when you plug it in, you get the absolute value of -5, which is... All right, I'll give you a second to catch. Let's do this. Several times they're going to ask you to graph the solution, okay? So if you look back, let's look back at this one that we just did, and then we'll move to the next one. If I were to graph this solution, all this is asking me to do is look at what x equals. And x equals, here's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. There's -7. And there is 3. That's how I graph the solution. Okay? All right, let's do another one. Let's say, then I'm going to show you a special kind. You try this one. Solve that for y. Some of us have got it. All right, two equations. First one, drop the absolute value. The second one, drop the absolute value and do what? Negative. Then what do I do? Subtract 2. And subtract 2. Two different answers. Is that what y'all got? Sure. All right. Look at this. This is where we start getting a little wonky. Somebody, anybody, guys, if you're working on the assignment, then please stay quiet while the rest of us work through these examples. I bet you somebody that is not paying attention is going to have a question about this, George. All right, then what's wrong with this?
It's a variable.
It's been a variable.
Yeah, but it's wrong with it. So,
If nothing's wrong with it, solve it.
yeah, nothing's wrong with it. There's nothing wrong.
You're right, Patrick. Why is that wrong? You're exactly right, Bailey. Well, it doesn't matter what you plug in right here. Those absolute values are going to force positive. There is nothing that you can plug in here that is going to make you get a negative. Nothing. Unless there's a negative outside. But if there's nothing but absolute value, there's nothing. So absolute values can never equal a negative. Okay? Yeah. So it would be called a no solution. You're exactly right.
So then the set equals a negative.
No solution. Exactly. Does that make sense to everybody? Your book, if you look at the answers in the book, when they have a no solution, they do this, which means a null set. That means no solution. Okay? Same thing. All right.